Gonna be hanging out in the hood.
Hi, welcome to Almost Cooperstown.
I'm Mark.
And this is Gordon, and we love talking about baseball.
Well, we're back with an episode after the Hall of Fame vote has taken place on January the 25th. And not to anybody's surprise, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens did not make the Hall of Fame.
I see. The problem is, I wish I was surprised. I wish I was surprised right now and that they were in the Hall of Fame, because I mean, only one person was voted into the Hall of Fame on this, and that was David Ortiz at 77% of the votes on his first ballot. And I have nothing against David Ortiz as a baseball player. In fact, I think he should be probably in the Hall of Fame. Certainly it helps that his final season of his career is one of the greatest all-time final seasons. And he actually was a huge part of helping those Red Sox teams not only lift the curse, but win multiple championships. And he was a beloved icon for baseball. So it is in no way surprising that David Ortiz is in the Hall of Fame. But there is something wrong with the Baseball Hall of Fame when David Ortiz is a first ballot Hall of Famer and Barry Bonds is not in the Hall of Fame.
Now, to Big Papi's credit, right? You heard his comments after he was inducted, and he was very saying, "I don't feel, it doesn't feel right not having those other guys there." Because
here's the thing: I would take Barry Bonds' career pre-steroids over getting in over David Ortiz's entire career. Like, it just feels like more than ever, the Hall of Fame in baseball is this. To me, this is the starkest indication that the Hall of Fame in baseball is not actually about putting in the players that have done the most for the game. It is about putting in the players the baseball writers of America like.
That's a hard point to argue, and it's interesting. Read Tyler Kepner in the New York Times, and one of the things the Times does, I thought was really interesting, is they do not let their baseball writers vote for the Hall of Fame.
Like one, I think it's dumb that it's just left to a committee of the writers, because it's this outdated thing of the past where like writing for the baseball team was this like almost okay, it was made into this mythologized position because the people that wrote about it were like the other baseball writers. So all the baseball writers, to get a little crudier, got around and circle jerked themselves to act out about there's this incredible historic profession, and only they are the arbiters that can decide who should get into the Hall of Fame. Bullshit. Are you going to really tell me that Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds don't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame?
And of course, never, you know that. And I was listening to Ken Rosenthal did from the ceremony when they announced everybody, I shouldn't say. He ended up doing 3 hours, and I've been listening to the hours where he brought in different folks, and he had Eduardo Perez, son of Tony Perez, on there, and Eduardo, who made the point, and I thought really good, that I played exactly at the time that Bonds and Clemens and these guys plays. These guys are Hall of Famers, 100%. Did I like the fact that they used stuff or they got bigger? I could see it. I know they were different, but they were Hall of Famers before. And even after the fact, I want to take my family to the Hall of Fame and show them and talk about these players, about what they did, maybe why they did it, but they're definitely among the greatest players ever, and they have to be there.
I'm pretty sure about this too. Bud Selig is in the Hall of Fame, correct?
Bud Selig is in the Hall of Fame, correct.
Right there. Everybody can just shut up. You're all hypocritical. So we're going to let the man that was the commissioner of baseball, who turned a blind eye to all of this going on because it helped resurrect baseball in the eyes of the fans, then turned around, shut the door on those people, acted like they were doing something awful, even though for the most part it wasn't against any of the rules when they were doing it. And now he's in the Hall of Fame while the rest of them are all kept out, even though he made a bunch of money off of what they were doing.
Well, a bunch of money. I'm not sure if I would look at it that way. I mean, he was an owner. He was an owner.
Yeah, that's the thing. The owners made a bunch of money off of what all these players were doing, and then turned around and were like, oh, I can't believe they were doing that.
Yeah, I actually, of all the people that sort of, denigrate the steroid era, I'd say the owners are among the minority. I don't really hear much.
Allowed guys like Schilling to run around and vilify these players and act like they did something that was so against the pale, even though it was more or less condoned by Major League Baseball for a long time.
Well, and the beat goes on, let's face it, and let's not get off on this tangent. We could probably do a whole episode, which no one would want to listen to, on the commissioners of baseball and how it's a terrible job, normally inhabited by terrible people.
Right, yeah. Nobody, let's put it this way. The only major sport I can think where people really like the commissioner is kind of weirdly basketball, because everybody hates Goodell. I don't think I've seen a commissioner hated more than Goodell at football.
Yeah.
And Manfred, nobody likes Manfred.
Yeah. It's blood money for sure.
It's a thankless, and you know what I do appreciate is that it is a thankless job, because literally everybody is going to hate you when you take that position.
Yeah, I'm a lackey for the other owners, and I'm going to do everything because they're the guys that hire me. Yep.
But I'm also going to be the guy that constantly gets in their way of making more money, because I'm going to have to occasionally be the one that says, no, you can't treat the players like farm labor, because they totally would if they could.
So one of the things we kicked around last week, and it was pretty funny, somebody wrote that the Giants should bring back Barry Bonds for like a game and then start his Hall of Fame retirement clock all over again.
Oh, I would totally do that if I was, because if anything, it would just, because see, the thing is that works great for the baseball writers is they don't have to talk about it anymore. Like, it's very easy to kind of sweep that under the rug and they don't have to deal with it anymore. But you put Bonds back on the ballot and you have to force them to talk about it even more. It gets harder and harder to be like, really? You're going to really, it's like, you know what? It's this idea of purity that just, it's so
puritanical.
Yes. Like, oh, we're the baseball. It's like, no, you know what's pure? You know what's even worse? Papering over the history to ignore the fact that there were these guys that were part of the game. Yeah. So actually, Bonds does come up on the ballot again this year, but it's not the writer's ballot. As we've talked about, there are different committees, and the Today's Game Committee, and there's the Hall of Fame has Golden Era committees. They have a few extra committees that review players. So they meet in December of this year, and it's 16 players mostly. I think it's almost all players, including Greg Maddux and Ozzie Smith. I couldn't find the names of all. It's like they don't want to make public the 16 people. Sense. They probably don't want to make sense because that puts such an unbelievable degree of pressure on all of them, because then people can more directly label like appeal to them to try and get them to go with certain things. So
you need 12 out of 16, or 75% again. There's that number. Okay, so it's not that different than the writers where you need the 75%, but now you're going to have all these backroom deals, because when you got players that either played with them or know guys that played with them, guys like Harold Baines get into the Hall of Fame because the people in the room lobby for him. And although LaRussa will contest this till the day he dies, I'm sure, you end up electing a guy that people scratch their heads because they had a smaller group that they could manipulate, if you will, a little bit.
And also, players are notoriously bad at players are really, really good at identifying when another player is good, but they're really bad at identifying when another player is bad. So if there is a player that they all generally perceived as being good, they're going to hold on to that way longer than the baseball writers, where if we go back and we look at the stats and we go, wow, that guy really wasn't as good, but the perception of the other players in his era was that he was good. No amount of advanced stats ever going to convince them that he wasn't that quality of a player.
And wouldn't you say there's a little bit of self-interest there? So if you're playing at the time and you look at a guy from your year who was passed over and all of a sudden he's now a Hall of Famer, all those games he played against you were playing against the Hall of Famer.
You retroactively mean more. And I can also say that, you know what? If I'm a guy that is from that era of baseball, if you're from an era where you're playing with McGuire and Sosa and Bonds, and you're a pitcher, don't you want all of those guys to get the credits for being, because it's steroids didn't make those guys. It didn't make Bonds into a great hitter. Barry Bonds was a great hitter without steroids. And
Eduardo Perez also said, he goes, look, I knew other guys that were taking steroids when Bonds was playing. They just weren't very good baseball players. So no amount of steroids were going to make them into Barry Bonds.
And that's what I said. Would have Sosa hit maybe 100 or 150 less home runs in his career if he doesn't take steroids? Maybe, but that means he still hit 450 to 500 home runs in his career.
Right. He was a home run hitter first before he took steroids. You couldn't take steroids. All of a sudden, I can hit the ball farther than anybody now.
Steroids the same way. The steroids might have made it so that Clemens could keep pitching like a freak, almost 20 seasons into his career, but they didn't make him into a great pitcher.
100% agree. So I thought we would cover, and this is kind of a fun thing because we're going to go through this, I hope, relatively quickly.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the players are going to be on for the first time when the ballot comes out at the end of this calendar year for the 2023 January announcement of the Hall of Fame. And what I didn't know, we've already gone through the qualifications for the Hall of Fame, which I won't belabor here, other than the fact that I didn't realize that there were screeners that actually would be ones to review the first-year candidates. Supposedly, then, if you're screening, that would mean that some people who have the necessary eligibility, right, the 10 years and all that, aren't going to be included because they just somehow made it through 10 years and don't even deserve a place on the ballot.
There's not that many guys that make it through 10-plus seasons of a career and have a really shitty WAR. It's kind of unusual in this day.
You're going to accumulate some WAR.
You're going to accumulate some, but generally guys don't make it 10 years plus in the major league without being at least a decent player. Probably the highest preponderance of guys you'll see are weird lefty one-out guys that just accumulate a bunch of seasons. They only have to throw 50 something innings a season. You don't have to be very good to do that.
But this has not given me more confidence in WAR. And by the way, it's just a tool, right? And even we've mentioned it before. Sean Foreman, the guy who founded Baseball Reference, said it's just a tool. And I'm not sure that after looking at these numbers, if I'm going to be more or less confident. I think it's a little less.
I think the issue is that WAR is a great statistic. It is not an all-encompassing statistic that you can just use as a quick reference guide to determine a player's value. On a very, very surface level, yes, it is, but especially career WAR is buoyed by so many different factors. Right. And I also want to say that one of the things you have to think about that's interesting is as the level of the game has improved, you'd think it's actually we're seeing more and more guys able to accumulate high percentages of WAR. But I think that's in part because of selection bias, in that the only guys that stick around in the major leagues long enough to have a long career are guys good enough to accumulate a high WAR. You don't get the career lifers that just kind of stick around because you need bodies to fill a major league team. They can churn through enough first and second year guys now that if you're not very good, you just don't stay.
And we're measuring this on an at-bat by at-bat basis now in a way that never happened before, right? Where you just would say, so when, we talked about, I'll just briefly say, a Grich and Abreu, I always compared the two from the standpoint of when I watched either of those two players, I never thought I was watching a Hall of Fame player, watching them play. And then you look at the advanced stats for both players and you think, wow, these guys did a lot of things really well that are really important to being a good baseball player. Mm-hmm. And as Eduardo Perez said, it can make you start to change your opinion of what you thought the player was.
Right, because the eye test is notoriously unreliable. The same way that looking at any one stat isn't going to paint the whole picture. I think what you need to do is step back and go, okay, what WAR will tell you roughly what was this guy in the percentage. You need to kind of just look at everything. WAR might give you how good this guy was relative to his peers. Talking with players from the era might give you the idea that some guys are just special in that way. Maybe their career stats are somewhat similar to other people's of that era, but they'll just say, man, there was just something different about that guy. He always made the big play when it mattered. Mm-hmm. And then you would also look at, who were the guys that maybe were not valued properly for what they contributed at the time. A guy like John Olerud, who is not a Hall of Famer, but you would look at and say was probably a much more valuable player than teams would have given him credit for in the late 90s because of the way he played baseball. People weren't interested in having a first baseman that could hit 330 and only 20 home runs, but 40 doubles. They would much rather have a guy hit 280 with 40 home runs.
Yeah, and a 390 or 380 on base average, which, these things are much more, scrutinized today.
Valued and played good defense. So he would have been a guy that would have been not necessarily a superstar, but he would have been looked at as a hugely valuable player if a guy with his skill set was playing today.
Yeah, you know how much I love that player too. So
I just think that it's something that when we're looking at with WAR, I think WAR is going to fall down because one of the other things that I think is also important is that WAR is also relative to the players that are all playing at a given point. If So you can have weird things that happen. So if you have a guy that breaks out at a position 1 year, and so now you've had this like really fast center fielder, let's say, this is more of a hypothetical. You have a really fast center fielder that's just dominating baseball, and the guys are like now looking at that as the prototypical center fielder. And he's
like a Byron Buxton type player.
Like a Byron Buxton type player. Somebody that really, okay, better example. Ohtani.
Mm-hmm.
Ohtani's going to cause this effect because teams are going to start trying to look for other Otanis.
Oh,
which
yes.
means you're going to see guys come in and try and be Ohtani and fail badly, which is going to jack up the other people that play similar roles WAR, because you're going to have all of these poorly performing guys coming in relative to them. They're going to just drag them down basically. And over a long period of time, over a career, you could see that have an effect on somebody if there was a lack of talent or a growth of talent at a particular position.
I'm not sure if Ohtani is the best comparative, but your point, I get your point.
He's more of the type of player I'm referencing.
Right, because somebody who does those things is such a white elephant. You can,
Over the next 20 years, you're going to see teams look for that kind of guy and try and cycle him in. And there will be a bunch that don't work, and we'll just not really remember them.
I guess JD Davis is not that guy, huh?
The same way we don't remember all of the non-Ichiro Suzuki and Hideki Matsui guys that came over, like Kaz Matsui, that were just not very good.
Right.
But no, I think looking at the guys that are coming in, because like next year, it's not a very impressive class aside from one guy.
Well, and it's funny because that one guy is going to be under scrutiny, and I wonder how much it's going to hurt. And that guy
it would be weird. Carlos Beltran.
Right.
70 career WAR, which we just spent about 5 minutes going on about how WAR is not a great statistic.
But significantly, it's double just about everybody else who's on the list for that the next season
of new people.
Correct.
Of new people getting added to the Hall of Fame next year. Realistically, there's only one guy that you're going to talk about, and that's going to make it, and that's Beltran. I can't see anybody else on that list because I think number 2 is John Lackey.
Yeah, I think so. With a 37 career WAR, which is higher than I would have imagined.
Right, which is kind of going into that. If you look at a lot of these guys that are now retiring that are going to be on the Hall of Fame mount, they have better career WARs than you would think, but they are clearly Hall of very good guys. John Lackey is like a poster boy pitcher for that.
Well,
way better than anybody would have expected, especially when he came up in that rookie year on that Angels run. Had a solid career, pitched well for a bunch of teams.
Good postseason pitcher.
I think he had 1 year where he was like an actual real Cy Young contender, but I don't think he never won one.
Nope.
I don't think.
Nope, he didn't.
And he was never the best pitcher in any league at any given time. Hall of very good. That's exactly where he belongs. And it's going to be everybody else we name on this list as we go.
So let's whip down the list and so Bronson Arroyo, who pitched a long time and had one of the stranger emotions.
Personally, I would struggle to put him even in the Hall of very good just because I watched that guy get shelled way too many times. Like there was too many seasons where you'd see Bronson Arroyo pitching for the Reds against the Mets. It'd be late August and you'd see ERA of 4.31. I'm like, I don't really think I can include a guy that had that many seasons with that kind of ERA.
So 3 things about Bronson Arroyo: the hair.
Yeah,
would be one thing. Number 2, he both started and relieved. You can determine whether or not that was effective or not, but he did both.
But you know what? He was able to go back from doing both because I remember he was a starter, then he became a reliever, then he went back to being a starter and was pretty good at being a starter that second time.
And the other thing I gave up, which I don't know, that he probably doesn't want to be remembered for this, is he gave up a lot of home runs.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the music thing.
Well, that's true. That's even better. You're right. That's something that a real baseball fan.
He's a musician,
Yeah, and a good one.
And a good one. But I think when you look at a guy like Arroyo, again, he's not a Hall of Famer. I'd be surprised if he stays on the ballot for more than a year. That's going to be the real interesting thing about this.
Yeah, because why don't you do that? So we'll go down the list and we'll both say, is anybody going to make it to year 2? So Bronson Arroyo, what would you say? Bronson Arroyo?
Yeah. That's going to be the thing. If we don't think Lackey and Arroyo are going to get there, I don't think anybody else we're about to throw out is about to get there.
So Eric Ibar?
No.
Okay, he stole some bases, had a nice career average, actually, surprisingly.
Probably has a better career than you would think, but like,
right.
I can't think of a single like, oh man, that was a real good Eric Ibar season.
So I consider myself a baseball fan, but I had to go look up Joaquin Benoit, and I could never tell is it Joaquin Benoit or Joaquin Benoit, because there was a basketball player named Benoit Benjamin, even though it was spelled like Benoit in the French way. I could never understand. So I don't know if it's Joaquin Benoit or Joaquin Benoit, but with a 17.9 career WAR, and he pitched obviously the requisite 10 years. I barely remember this guy, barely.
No, that like honestly, it's gonna be like when Uneski Betancourt comes up for the Hall of Fame whenever he inevitably retires, because he's hung around in the major leagues for an eternity, and people are gonna be like, this guy, he was in the major leagues for 10 years.
And so I think this is interesting, a plethora of relievers starting with the letter B. And Joe Blanton, I guess, started a little bit, but here's another guy going to be on the ballot for the first and only time.
Yeah, and that's what's going to be, is that, and that's what I said before we even really started talking about on the list. It's going to be all these reliever type of guys that are just the type of guys that are able to hang around in the major leagues for a long time.
So Blanton, with his 11-9 career WAR, did exceed the following guy, Jonathan Broxton, who is now eligible at a snappy 8.7 career WAR. I thought it was better than that.
Yeah, I remember Broxton was supposed to be like the guy.
He had a 36 save season for the Dodgers back in, I don't know, 92 or something like that. No, not 92. That'd be too far back. But
yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, no, in the 2000s. And so, and he pitched for Milwaukee, had a couple good seasons there, but I was really surprised.
He was supposed to be like the next big closer, and he just never really got there because he was after Gagne, I want to say.
Yes, he was, absolutely. Go ahead.
Gagne is one of those players I just always like talking about because he's such a weird case. Like, he's this guy that comes out of nowhere, has this 3-year stretch where he's the most dominant closer in baseball. I think almost or does win a Cy Young from the closer
I think
position.
He almost did win a Cy Young. You're right. He had like
second
consecutive save thing going on there. I think what's his name? Brad Lidge strikes me the same way a little bit, and had the
Lidge didn't have that unhittable peak. There was that 3-season peak where I think he had like 55, 62, and 61 saves. And it was just, I remember, and then he got wrapped up in the steroid thing, kind of similar to a lot of the guys where like he was accused, but it was never really proven. And then after that, he was just never the same player. So everybody just kind of assumed, okay, he stopped taking steroids and he wasn't the same guy at that point.
So I just mentioned that Mark Burley made the 5.8%, so he stays on the ballot another year, but he was close. Matt Cain is going to be on the ballot, Tim Lincecum's teammate. And if you had to, like, without looking, who had the better career from a total WAR standpoint, Lincecum or Cain? It was Cain, yeah. And by a fair margin.
Because Cain just pitched for so much longer.
Right. R.A. Dickey comes on the ballot, and as Met fans, we sort of always had a soft spot.
Retired for 10 years?
No, 5 years. 5 years.
It's only 5 years. Okay.
Right. 5 years. So, and that's surprising
yeah. Still. Okay. Dickey's a guy that maybe he might be a guy that floats an extra ballot because writers are weird and they like knuckleballers, but probably.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know. 23-7 career WAR. He had that 1 year, right? So he's always going to be looked back and looking at his career and go, oh, I did that, because he came up as a fireballing, guy, hurt his arm and reinvented himself.
That one particular surgery that they talk about, and he was like one of the first guys to get that and still be a player after getting a surgery like that.
Stephen Drew appears on the ballot for the first time.
I remember Stephen Drew.
The lesser of the two Drew brothers, actually, because JD was a better player than him, if you ask me.
Oh, yeah, but they were both supposed to be like big time players.
I think he was a first-round draft pick, Stephen Drew, or something like that from Arizona. I don't remember.
And neither of them ever really put it together. It'd be tough to say.
Jacoby Ellsbury is on the ballot for the first time. What a nice ball player he was, and injuries just robbed him of his ability.
Ellsbury's the type of guy that would probably be in the Hall of Fame if he was, not hurt for basically half of his career.
And he had a 31 career WAR in the years he did play.
Right, exactly. And he lost so many seasons to injury.
Yeah. I forgot at the end that he played for the Yankees. Andre Ethier, which I seems like I saw him play last year, but I guess he's been out 5 years.
He's been out for a while. I'm surprised he's only been out 5 years, though. But yeah, he's the kind of guy where you're like not even close. It's like Matt Kemp.
Does Ellsbury make the ballot a second year?
Maybe. It's
Okay, so we'll put him as the only guy so far besides Beltran we think has a chance.
right. Maybe Ellsbury floats an extra year just because people liked him.
And how about Jason Grilly? Remember Jason Grilly?
Not really. The reliever for the Pirates, if I remember.
Yeah, you do remember him. And with his 4.6 career WAR, he will not be appearing again. J.J. Hardy, who had a real nice start to his career, and ended up with a 28-1 career WAR and hit a lot of home runs at a middle infield position.
Was a better player than people remember, but again, Hall of very good, because the problem that for a lot of these guys is you're like, look at the shortstops you have to compete against.
Right.
Like A-Rod is sitting there, and you're like, A-Rod maybe because he got caught doing steroids after Major League Baseball outlawed it, so it's a little bit easier to be like, okay, yeah, you knew what you were doing, buddy. But like, still, if you're going to take a career of that magnitude is not in the Hall of Fame, there's no way J.J. Hardy can be in
and and I think Hardy won 1 Gold Glove, and he did some things at the middle infield position, particularly early in his career.
He's just a good player. He was just a good player.
Yep. And how about Aaron Hill, another guy that surprised me with the amount of power he showed in his career, 162 career home runs. That really surprised me at a middle infield position. Not a Hall of Famer, clearly.
Second baseman, right?
Yeah. And a good one. He had some years where he hit like 36 homers.
Yeah, there was a couple years I remember for the Blue Jays, right?
Yeah, the Blue Jays and the Diamondbacks. Yes.
Yeah, I remember he had a couple seasons where he was a really big name player.
Absolutely. Ubaldo Jimenez, he of the no-hit fame, correct?
He had 1 or 2. He had that one season where his first half for the Rockies was like otherworldly.
Right, but he won't be on the ballot, you figure, another year, even with his 20.4 career WAR. We mentioned Lackey. Does Lackey hang around a 37.3 WAR for his career?
He'd be the other guy I think that has a chance.
Okay. A guy that I used to pick on my fantasy team all the time who just killed me, Adam Lind. I had some really nice seasons, but managed only to accumulate a 12.7 career WAR, so he had to have some bad ones.
Like, exactly. or his good seasons, you probably only remember the 1 or 2 good seasons and block out the rest of the nondescript career.
And WAR is a strange thing in terms of a guy like Mike Napoli, who was a hitter with power for years at the catcher position, and ended up accumulating, and I think really in his case it is accumulating 26.3 career WAR. Nice player. That's it.
Because he's just a guy that hit home runs, so he's going to accumulate WAR just on the basis of he's in playing, hitting home runs, and the guys that probably aren't hitting home runs.
And our friend Jim Catch from our fantasy league always likes to call him Jahani Peralta because of the way he spells his first name. And Jahani had a 30.4 career WAR. I have no idea how he did that.
Probably a better defender than people gave him.
I hope so. There's a Glenn Perkins who was a relief pitcher, I think, for the Twins at some point. I guess he pitched 10 years. You're right. That's how he's on the ballot. So
here's what I'm saying. These screener guys are clearly not doing it. I guess these are the guys that.
Right.
If these are the guys that are on the ballot, I'm questioning how good a job they're doing.
I followed that notion up with Chad Qualls. Can you Chad Qualls? No, he had a 5.8 career WAR, which I believe is might be the lowest. No. The lowest WAR is Jason Grilly at 4.6 on this first year ballot.
And I'm pretty sure Chad Qualls had one season where he was really good. So probably that 5.8 was probably mostly concentrated in like one particular season.
He wasn't one of those guys who's like his hand almost touched the ground when he threw it, right? He came from underneath. Yeah. I think he was
definitely came in underneath.
So, and how about Met fans' favorite, our favorite relief pitchers, although Benitez would be our just favorite relief pitcher. It would be K-Rod, Francisco Rodriguez, first year on the ballot. He of the 62 career saves, most in the history of the game.
What? No.
He had a season where he had 62 saves, which is the most for one season.
Yes. So, he won't get it.
No, 24 career WAR. He had some nice stats, but 437 saves is truly an cumulative stat that doesn't say anything about how lousy he was at the end of his career.
Right, and he pitched for a long time. I just can't see him getting it. If Wagner isn't going to get in, K-Rod's not going to.
No doubt about that, or even Joe Nathan for that matter, who's now off the ballot. Joe didn't make it to the next year. Carlos Ruiz, the old catcher of Cole Hamels and Cliff Lee and the Phillies championship teams.
It's more sad that all these guys had 10+ seasons.
Well, right. And that's how you get 22-5 career WAR. He played enough seasons and put it up there. How about Houston Street? He's now eligible for the Hall of Fame. Yeah, another one of those relief pitchers who's on there.
Yeah, it's just all relievers and like backup catchers.
But I got two more guys, and one of them is Jared Weaver, and it's kind of interesting because he had a much better career. Again, he played a lot of years for the Angels, and so we didn't see him on the East Coast as much.
Which, I think this is more because he had a couple really good seasons, and he was a good pitcher until just his velocity eventually went away.
But a 34-6 career WAR is, that's a probably a better player than I thought he was. I didn't realize he was that good.
I think that's just East Coast, West Coast bias.
No doubt.
So we just don't realize how good he was.
And this guy, and I don't know that we'd ever get him on the podcast, but he just killed the Mets. Jason Worth, whether it was on the Phillies or the Nationals, this guy was a thorn in the side, and he also had a nice career, not Hall of Fame worthy.
No. There's one guy. It's Beltran. Every other player will not make the Hall of Fame. I have full and complete confidence in saying that. In fact, it would not be surprising if Beltran gets in on maybe a first ballot, and then literally no other guys make it to a second year.
Well, and here's the reason that might not happen, and that could really help some of the other guys on the ballot when you think about it, because you lost a lot of guys off the ballot, right? You have all these guys that were in their 10th year that fell off, that were sucking up some votes, and so now you can't even throw votes over there. So where are those votes going to go? To the existing players in the list, like a Scott Rowland? So does he make it next year? And because now there's more guys that can vote for him,
it's not going to be any of these players. Let me tell you that, except for Beltran.
Yeah, I think you're right that the two guys, Lackey and maybe
Ellsbury, are the only two that have any shot at staying on multiple seasons.
But probably not. Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. And you can follow us on Twitter at Almost Coop.